A man accused of assaulting an ICE agent on the Iron Range appeared in federal court this morning.
Northern News Now's Kyrie Johnson sat in on that hearing and breaks down what happened.
19-year-old Jose Espinoza faced serious criminal assault charges after an encounter with ICE agents on the Iron Range last week. But ultimately, the case was dismissed as prosecution failed to meet the burden of proof. Espinoza was escorted into federal court this morning following an alleged assault on a federal officer last Friday at Cazadores Mexican restaurant, which is inside the Thunderbird Mall in Virginia. Immigration officers say when they approached a vehicle suspected of transporting undocumented immigrants, Espinoza accelerated, injuring an agent's finger, then rammed a government vehicle. When prosecutors were asked to produce witnesses today, they said none were available. The judge then dismissed the case, ruling the government failed to meet its burden of proof. Both sides of counsel declined to comment. However, Duluth DFL Rep. Elish Kozlowski and Duluth DFL Senator Jen McEwen attended, saying this is part of a larger pattern of federal charges filed without sufficient evidence.
There's hundreds of Jose's across Minnesota and across this country. Even the federal government couldn't show a witness or probable cause for the lies and the tactics that they're employing.
People from the community and rapid response members were also present during the hearing.
We have legal observers who are out there documenting and making sure that when our community members are taken, that they don't go unwitnessed.
Without a way to navigate the uncertainty of the ICE enforcement locally, advocates say they're left with few options but to simply observe. The judge emphasized that the Department of Homeland Security is free to pursue other cases related to immigration on this. In Duluth,